Hi, Year 11. Welcome to this screencast. As you can see on the screen, what we're going to be looking at is paper 1, which of course is the paper that makes up 70 whopping % of your English language certificate. So it's very important that you pay attention to this screencast, watch it several times, and apply it to some practice questions. Now, to remind you of what you had to do for your mock exam, the first section, Section A, which you get 45 minutes for, you had to read this nonfiction passage and then answer some questions. The first question will always be a 3-mark question. It'll ask you to look at a particular phrase. In this case, it was lines 19 through 27. And then it wanted 3 words or phrases that the writer used to describe the sound made by the fire. This is an example of why it is so important to actually read the question carefully. Some of you wrote down answers that had nothing to do with sounds, but with other senses, and so you didn't receive any credit for that. You could have said any of the 4 quotes that you see on the screen over here: roaring fire, sparks popping, because it's sound, crackling, sparks, okay, but nothing else. Now, the next question asks you to describe in your own words the character of Jenny. This means that you do not use any quotes. What you should do is look at the character and simply, as I've written on this person's paper, aim for 5 adjectives that describes the character of Jenny. So in this example, you can see that Jenny is organized, always ahead, she plans, and then it goes on and so on. And as you will see, there aren't any quotes there from the passage. So simply writing about 5 adjectives would get you your 5 marks. Now, these are from the mark scheme. Lots of different things that you could have said about Jenny. Come back and look at the slide in your own time, but you can see how all of these different words, well-prepared, brave, tenacious, persistent, caring, not house-proud. I thought this one was really interesting. I didn't see anyone who said this, possibly someone with a spiritual dimension to her life as she prays. I thought that one was quite interesting. Now, question 3 is worth 12 marks, and it will always be, how does the writer try to create interest and suspense in the passage? Now, I want you to notice that in the questions it says that you should write about these 3 bullet points. You need to make sure that you do that. Structure your answer so you first write about the description of the snow, then about the ways of the reactions, then particular words, phrases. And look, it says you may include brief quotes, but you don't have to include long ones. Now, I want you to take a look at this ladder. This is how you get to A star. Simply starting off, we've talked about this in class, you give your opinion about a text and you use a quote to support your view. Okay, to get to a higher level, to climb the ladder, if you will, you need to then explain how and why the quote supports your opinion. Then you explore it. Perhaps you offer an alternative explanation. So, for example, it could also mean because, or it might mean, so on and so forth. That's going to get you a higher level. Then add some analysis in where you zoom in on certain words. All right, we've talked about this. The word blank blank is effective because. And then for A star, you evaluate and you zoom out. Now, this is a really good example of a paragraph written about this question about the description of the snow. To begin with, which is good because it starts with the connective, the writer conveys the snow as very unexpected. There's your point right there. The point has been made. This is evident when the passage says the snow fell sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Right? There's the evidence that proves the point. It tells us the writer also described the snow as careless. Okay, some further analysis. These words and phrases show that you don't know what the snow will be like, meaning that it was inconvenient for Jenny. Okay, so that's relating back to the question, as she had to be prepared for anything, from peaceful snow to fierce storms. And the next paragraph then talked about fierce storms, so that last sentence links in to the next. Using the Pearl method will really help your writing. Now, conclusions are not necessary. You have 45 minutes in Section A. That's 45 minutes to read the nonfiction text that you've not seen before and answer 3 questions. So, if you don't have time to write a conclusion, that's fine. If you'll see what I've written here, instead of taking the time to write a conclusion that summarizes what you've already said, don't write one. Go back and make your point stronger, move on to the next section of the exam, and come back to it later if you have time. Now, every point needs to connect very clearly to the question. So, for example, this one says, this description creates an image in the reader's head, causing the reader to comprehend how powerful the snow was. It doesn't have anything to do with the question, so it needs to be very specific and connect to the question. So be as specific as possible. Here, I know this is quite blurry, I'm sorry about that, but as you can see, this person's was too vague. Personification and imagery create a vivid image in the reader's mind. Well, where's the example? Okay, anyone could say this about any text, but you need to prove it. Now, as I've already said, you need to remember to use the Pearl method. This right here, although it looks like a short paragraph, was a fantastic paragraph. Let's look at it. The writer also uses triads, list of 3, to describe the snow, point sentence, as well as revealed in, and then here's your example, colder air, careless, unhurried. This portrays, okay, here's the evaluation, the disastrous, or explanation I mean, this portrays the disastrous actions of the snow and reveals a sense of fright. That is really good, because if the reader hadn't evidenced these deadly weather conditions, then they are bound to feel unsure and uncertain. Very good. Right, remember, we don't want you to be too vague. For example, here, this language device is interesting because it is a short list. It makes it eye-catching, result this the reader hooked onto the text. All of that is kind of Key Stage 3 style of writing. We know the reader's hooked into the text. You've been asked about suspense, so too vague. If you can't think of anything about the text that makes it engaging, look at the adjectives. Find some phrases that show us that it's interesting. Okay, and just some other examples for you to come back and look at your own time, examples that are too vague. Let's look at what English teachers like. We like examples like this. Okay, firstly, connective. The snow in the blizzard is personified as a terrible creature which swallowed the whole family and buried them alive. That is a really strong point. The strong action also adds to the image that the blizzard is a legion of furious freezing ghosts, so they've supported it with yet another quote, which creates frightening imagery in the reader's head. Whoops, got excited about that. The writer employs this tool to create suspense and interest as the reader wants to know, and here's a specific effect, which is why I've highlighted it. What were the consequences of the attack from the blizzard? And this keeps the reader interested in the storyline. Excellent work there. Another really good one. Graphic imagery. Here, paints a picture with the words, the storms of Jenny's struggle, and makes the reader feel pathos, yes, pathos, but also admire Jenny's courage and determination. It's really good, really high level if you can talk about 2 different effects. All right, moving on to Section B. Now, Section B, you also have 45 minutes. The first thing that you'll see is one of the texts from Anthology A. On your mock exam, it was a game of polo. Then you have to answer some questions. The first one is, how does the writer try to share her experience of being at the race? The wrong answer is with words, okay? We know that when it says how, we need to look at language and structure. Now, language and structure. First of all, it says that you should refer to the passage, and they've given it to you. So the first thing you need to do is highlight the bits that you think really share her experience of being at the race. Obviously, I can't highlight in a straight line. Okay, and it says that you can include brief quotations. Some of you spend too much time copying down the text. You don't need to do that. Now, look at how they mark you for this. Okay, I've highlighted it here. The writer's ability to construct and convey meaning in language. Now, for this, you are, let me just skip ahead of myself here. I think I've moved on. Okay, here we go. You are being marked on how well you're writing. And spelling and punctuation and everything counts. In fact, it counts for 1/3 of your marks. So it's really important that you keep an eye on that. This is an excellent example of how the writer shares her experiences of being at the race. At the beginning of the travelogue, that's quite good, actually detail what type of text it is. The writer is looking forward to the race and was excited. The writer showed her excitement, here we go with the evidence, by using the rhetorical question, are they coming, which shows that she is looking forward to the race. She's also very impatient and waiting for an eternity until the race starts. This is exactly what I want you to do. Embed one little quote into your sentence. The use of exaggeration, so that's the third technique this person has mentioned in this paragraph, shows that she waited for a long time and cannot wait till the race starts. Excellent work there. Now, here's one that's too vague. In the following paragraph, the writer tries to describe what the race was like by saying things such as, this was Formula One without rules or a city center rush hour gone anarchic. This helps us understand what exactly the race was like. Really? How? It's too vague. What is the specific effects? How does it link to the question? Here it says how manic the race was turning out to be. That's good. Move this bit until earlier on in your answer. Right, the writing part of section B. Write a description of an event or occasion which was important to you. Now, we don't know what the question will be, of course, but we know that you will be asked to inform, explain, describe. Now, I really enjoyed reading these, but let's talk a little bit about description. This is a lot of information on the page, obviously. It comes from this website if you want to take a look at it. But I really liked a few key points here. The writer becomes the soul of the reader. Okay? What mood are you trying to create? Right? You also are becoming, when you are doing descriptive writing, the consciousness of the reader. Okay? It directs attention. And then you can order your descriptions spatially, thematically, or impressionistically. Okay? Now, spatial, you describe a scene, and then you move into detail, kind of like a zoom on a camera. Thematic description is you divide it into categories. Okay, so if you're describing, for example, a religious ceremony, you might begin with what happens at the beginning, and then the middle and the end. Or you might talk about the words and then talk about the food or the celebration. Impressionistic patterning for description is you imagine, given the mood of what the reader might be thinking, what you would see first and then second and then so on. Come back to this slide, please, and do take a look at it. I really like this example of descriptive writing. Now, full of fruits that we were willing to eat, a river that was changing his shape was across the trees, and small wooden bridges connected on each side so we could pass from one to the other. No one talked. Only the sound of vines broke the silence of that place, of birds, sorry, broke the silence of that place. Really good. Starting off with a little bit of detail on the fruit trees, then zooming out to the river, then coming into the bridge, very short dramatic sentence, no one talked, and then coming out to the silence. That is some excellent descriptive writing. Easy peasy tip for descriptive writing. Use adverbs. For example, here, my brother burst through the door, burst is excellent, shouted happy birthday. I thanked him and opened his present. I thanked him and opened his present eagerly, quickly, excitedly. Adverbs are an easy peasy, lemon squeezy way to improve your descriptive writing. Section C. Now, look at this question. Write a letter to your newspaper explaining how the area you could live could be improved. You may choose to write about, so you don't have to write about these bullet points. Improved for young people, the focus of the question. Some of you did not do that. You just wrote about your local areas. Remember that you're being marked on your grammar on this question, so you need to use a range of punctuation devices. Okay, so not just full stops and question marks or exclamation marks, but move on. Try to use an ellipsis. Try to use quotation marks. Try to use a colon, a semicolon, brackets. Focus on the question with your answer. Okay, here, the transport in Hounslow is possibly one of the worst cases in London. Buses come on schedule, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, that's all really good, but remember the question asks you about young people. So explain how the buses and the transport affect young people, then give a solution for how it could be solved. Remember to explain all of your points. Some really good points here. The mood at this point in the poem shows the phrase makes the reader feel sad. This is actually from paper 2, but I wanted to point out it's a good point, but we just need to explain why. So make sure your writing has plenty of explanation. Now, we've got 30 seconds left here. Some ideas for how you revise. For section A, read nonfiction from The Guardian, because it's about the level of vocabulary that you'll have on the test, and answer the question that's on the screen. For section B, revise all of those texts. Test yourself by making sure that you know them really well. you know that you can find it on the S drive and also on EdXcel's website.